because she suffers from such a rare disorder of being unable to just be a human. And you already get all of the Meghan and Harry buzzwords. They talk about mental health, bias, cyberbullying, and of course, Black.
In 2022, Candace Owens tweeted, "Every day, Harry and Meghan wake up and think, how can we make millions of more people around the world hate us?" It was harsh, but it resonated with something many people were already thinking. Just recently, Meghan Markle featured in a podcast, and no critic has come down harder than Candace Owens. Owens didn't just criticize the podcast, she ripped it apart. What exactly did Meghan say this time that made things explode all over again? Let's find out.
Meghan Markle should officially hang up her headphones. Her latest podcast is essentially a flop at this point.
Even when she was giving us reality, she couldn't give us reality. So I just wanted to say that if you don't like her, it's not your fault. It's because she's extremely unlikable, okay? She has the non-it factor. It's amazing. She's actually good at this. All right, let's start with Harry and Meghan, who are working on a very serious rebrand. It is abundantly obvious.
Candace's truth about Meghan Markle. According to Candace, there has been growing frustration among some observers who genuinely want to like Meghan Markle but struggle to do so. These observers have been able to point out that the problem isn't about scandal or gossip, but something more profound and complex to pin down, which is what they describe as emotional distance, the rare struggle to come across as simply human. According to her, she has never seen someone who finds it so hard to show even a single moment of raw, unscripted authenticity.
Because she suffers from such a rare disorder of being unable to just be a human.
She highlights how Meghan often appears carefully crafted, as if everything is filtered through a lens of perfection. Even moments meant to feel casual, like cooking at home with friends or sharing lifestyle glimpses, seem polished and staged. However, that's not all. The Cakes Look magazine perfect. The backyard garden feels like a film set, and the glamorous guests and perfect lighting all suggest a carefully curated image. Candace compares this to a common contradiction. The message claims it's not about perfection, yet the visuals tell a very different story.
Full glam. And we're like, it's not about perfection, but then you look at what we've made and it's literally perfect. In fact, just when I make a cake, it looks just like that with my girlfriends. I look perfect, they look perfect, the cake looks perfect, but we say it's not about perfection.
She goes on to question who advises Meghan behind the scenes, because the way she presents herself feels overly controlled. She mentions Taylor Swift as someone whose team has successfully struck a balance. However, that's not where it stops. She goes on to question why Meghan can't have a similar strategy, one where it's okay to just be a person, with messy hair or a casual day, picking up kids or going about daily life without everything feeling staged.
And I just want to know who's around her, because I feel like she needs Taylor Swift's marketing team, okay? Love her, hate her, think she's a fraud, whatever you want to say about Taylor Swift, she has had a brilliant marketing team behind her. Hey, if I'm on that marketing team and I'm strategizing, I'm like, hey, here's what we're going to do. You're just going to be a person. She's like, what? What are you saying? You're going to get up out of bed, okay? Your hair's going to be a little messy, out of place. You're going to go pick up your kids, maybe if that's what you do. And we're just going to try to figure out like who you are.
The recent Netflix teaser, which was put on hold, is another example Candace uses. It didn't exactly land the way they probably hoped. Instead of building excitement, it sparked a wave of mockery. What was supposed to feel intimate and heartwarming ended up reminding people of a rom-com trailer, the kind with bouncy background music and dreamy camera filters, something similar to what Drew Barrymore or Julia Roberts would feature.
I don't think people are, at least in the industry, are totally catching up with, because they're very much in this different mindset, you can say, than the rest in the world in some ways, which is that Harry and Meghan, yes.
In the show, Meghan is seen at a friend's mansion, putting on a perfect gathering, serving neat-looking dishes, and picking honey from a garden. It was supposed to feel down to earth, but it didn't come across that way. With so many people struggling, the whole thing felt a little off, and they ultimately delayed the release.
Meghan, our Duchess, has decided that she's going to push the Netflix series, the one that we showed you of her cooking, because it's so relatable. She felt that maybe it would not be relatable at this time to see her cooking in a mansion that belongs to one of her friends and inviting over her rich and fabulous people.
At the same time, Meghan and Prince Harry were seen visiting communities in Southern California that had recently faced tragedy. Candace recalls a moment when a local mayor described Meghan bending down to lift the lid off a plastic bin, a small action that was oddly highlighted as meaningful. For some, it raised questions about how even minor gestures were being portrayed as significant.
She stooped down and she picked up the lid of a plastic bin. And that's how I knew my girl was real. And I just want to thank Meghan for doing that. It's very helpful for her to stoop down and do that. If there's any plastic bins you guys see around that need picking up, you can hit up your girl, Meghan Markle. It's amazing. I really got just such a chuckle out of that description. It's just such a nonsense. Nobody cares. Send money.
Many pointed out that these communities need real aid, including housing, food, and financial support, rather than symbolic photo opportunities. The criticism focused not on what Meghan and Harry did, but on how these moments were presented. All of this feeds into a broader online conversation about perception. People are not just reacting to the actions themselves, but to the way they are packaged.
It's just such a nonsense. Nobody cares. Send money, send food. Is about what these people need. They need donations, they need a place to live, they need hotels. That's not to say they aren't doing that. I'm sure perhaps they are in the background. But I don't understand this visit.
Even when intentions are genuine, the constant feeling of carefully directed scenes creates a barrier to connection. According to Candace, the lack of authenticity and polished branding surrounding Meghan Markle makes it difficult for many to relate to her as simply a human being, and she has proven Candace right.
Meghan Markle, don't we? And where do we even begin with this one, Darren? Because her new Netflix cooking series, With Love, Meghan, has dropped in what can only be described as the most nauseating, insufferable load of nonsense.
When Meghan, the Duchess of Sussex, launched her new Netflix reality series, With Love, Meghan, it felt like history was being repeated. Just like her podcast, it was designed to feel personal and authentic, a peek into her world, her thoughts, and her values. However, the public response was anything but kind once again.
This nauseating, insufferable load of nonsense. Actually, it gave me the ick, quite frankly. And no surprises, it's been a flop with an 11% rating from viewers, falling behind wrestling and sitcoms on Netflix.
The reviews were rough. The Independent called it queasy and exhausting. Vulture said it explored new frontiers and unrelatability. Even The Times joked that if you thought the podcast was hard to sit through, the show is somehow worse. Then, on Rotten Tomatoes, it had a 33% critic score and an even more brutal 20% from audiences.
Darren, sorry, has she just poured a bag of pretzels into another bag? What sort of a genius are we dealing with here?
However, not everyone hates With Love, Meghan. Scroll through X long enough, and you'll find people who find it sweet. Some call it soft, wholesome, or oddly relaxing. Of course, others love it for the memes. However, despite brutal reviews and a 20% audience score on Rotten Tomatoes, Netflix decided to move ahead with another season. There's more going on here than just a poorly rated show. Pop culture experts and psychologists say this backlash isn't really about the series itself. It's about Meghan, as it has always been. And for someone like her, every move becomes a talking point. Stephanie Sarkis, a psychotherapist, says we're watching Meghan through a lens of constant judgment and that no matter what she does, someone will tear it apart. Some see her as a voice for change.
One of the things that makes Meghan Markle very bizarre to people is her behavior, and that's why whenever Meghan complains about people not liking her and blaming the media for it, her argument falls flat because people are like, no, we don't like you for you. I don't care what the Daily Mail is saying.
Others think she's manipulative. Some people admire her strength, while others can't stand the sight of her. So, when a show like With Love starring Meghan dropped, the response wasn't just about kitchen scenes or camera angles, it was about how people feel about her. Rob Shooter, a former celebrity publicist who now hosts Naughty But Nice, confirmed this, stating it has nothing to do with what Meghan is doing. It's about who she is. That's why even a simple lifestyle show becomes a problem.
I don't think I have the words to describe my reaction to that. Like Candace said, it's super out of touch. She must not know how she looks. Like, it must be as simple as that. She's like,
the irony, as Candace mentioned, is that they show us the real Meghan, and it isn't even filmed in her real house. It's shot in a nearby rental. When you're building a show around the idea of home, family, and authenticity, that detail doesn't go unnoticed. Shooter says this has been the same pattern since she and Harry left royal life in 2020. They said they wanted privacy. However, now there's a podcast, a Netflix deal, a whole media brand. And when they do open up, it feels overly polished and controlled.
We both, all of us, are in full glam. And we're like, it's not about perfection. But then you look at what we've made and it's literally perfect. In fact, just when I make a cake, it looks just like that with my girlfriends. I look perfect. They look perfect. The cake looks perfect. But we say it's not about perfection. Really? Because I feel like it maybe is precisely about perfection. Skipping through with honey and bees. Like, who are you trying to be?
She's entered a foreign territory, literally and figuratively, and gouged something out of that territory, taken it away to another place, and is now feeding on it. So she's absolutely, the actions itself.
It's like Meghan gives a glimpse of her life, then shuts the door. Now here's why it's a bit of a ruckus. For a while, Meghan kept her children out of the spotlight entirely. Then suddenly, they appear in social media clips. That's where the criticism creeps in. She says one thing, then people feel like she's doing another.
I think many of us assumed, well, then she's going to want a more private life so she doesn't have to deal with that constantly. But instead, she is constantly in the limelight. She's constantly putting herself into people's faces. I mean, she was on Oprah. She's got this documentary on Netflix. Now Prince Harry's coming out with his book. And it's like, oh my God, we are oversaturated.
However, not everybody is totally against her. After everything Meghan has been through, racist headlines, public attacks, and the pressure of the monarchy, it makes sense that she is being cautious. She has talked openly about how the scrutiny nearly broke her. At one point, she even said it pushed her to think about ending her life.
That I would do it, and I just didn't want to be alive anymore.
And with that kind of pain in your past, it's not surprising she holds the world at arm's length. So maybe the bigger question here isn't whether with love, Meghan is good or bad. Perhaps it's this. Is Meghan just trying to survive in a world that refuses to give her a break? Or is she carefully crafting an image that doesn't match reality? That brings us to the podcast, because when Meghan took that next step behind the microphone, what exactly was she trying to prove? For Candace Owens, it was just another example of precisely what she has been saying all along.
It's not even her mansion. It's a neighbour's friend's mansion, apparently. But the whole idea of doing a cooking show from a massive mansion in one of the richest enclaves in America, in Montecito, and pretending you're relatable, as Candace said, is utterly preposterous.
After launching her lifestyle brand, American Riviera Orchard, and stepping into the home entertaining scene with her Netflix series, With Love, Meghan, the Duchess of Sussex decided to come back to another familiar space, podcasting. This time, she teamed up with Lemonada Media to debut a new show titled Confessions of a Female Founder, which premiered on April 8th.
Now let's talk about Meghan Markle. Her podcast, Confessions of a Female Founder, has been lashed by the critics.
The announcement was made through Meghan's Instagram, where she shared her excitement over the project and described it as a platform for candid conversations with female entrepreneurs, women who, in her words, had turned dreams into realities and built successful businesses from small ideas. Meghan said the podcast has been eye-opening, inspiring, and fun. She spoke of picking the brains of her guests as she works on developing her own business as ever.
So I'm not sure if you've caught up on this week's episode of Confessions of a Female Founder, but it's such a good one. And it reminds me of that quote, "Wherever you go, there you are." That is what my conversation with Cassie is like, because 20 plus years later, so much has changed, and yet we are so...
Let's take you back to where it all started. A while back in 2024, when she first signed the deal with Lemonada, she said she was proud to support a female-founded media company with a lineup of thoughtful and entertaining podcasts. For her, it seemed like the right way to begin a new chapter. However, despite the enthusiasm behind the scenes, public reaction has been less than kind.
So I guess we'll kick off with the question most people want to ask, why? Or if I was going to be more specific, why Meghan?
Just some years ago, Meghan's previous podcasting effort, Archetypes, created under a $20 million deal with Spotify, came to an end. The podcast launched in 2022, featuring big names like Serena Williams, Mindy Kaling, and Paris Hilton, focusing on the stereotypes women face. Though her husband, Prince Harry, and their son Archie made a brief appearance during a holiday special in 2020, the series didn't last. By 2023, Spotify and the couple announced they had mutually agreed to part ways.
Archetypes is a big, massive, old flop.
Now, with Confessions of a Female Founder, Meghan seems eager to reset the narrative. However, critics say the new show has stumbled out of the gate. The reviews this time haven't just been harsh, they have been blistering. Some listeners describe the podcast as nothing more than a carefully polished vanity project. The first episode with Whitney Wolfe Herd skips over critical parts of Wolfe Herd's controversial startup history, brushing it aside with a casual, everyone knows that already.
I don't know if you've had a chance to listen to this podcast, but what a missed opportunity. What a waste of oxygen. What a waste of our time, if I'm being quite honest with you. How many people are going to give this woman...
In doing so, the show avoids more profound truths, which many felt would have been crucial to understanding the guest's path. The second episode, featuring Meghan's conversation with Reshma Saujani, was a bit better. Saujani was at least upfront about how driven she is, which made things more interesting. However, even then, the talk didn't go very deep. Some felt that a lot was almost like surface-level chat, not something you would walk away from with real advice or helpful tips, especially if you were hoping for solid insight into building a business or dealing with challenges. Instead of exploring the harsh realities of building a business, the show comes across to some as a platform for flattery. Critics say it's full of sugary praise and empty conversations, where guests and hosts fawn over each other with such sweetness that it feels artificial. There's little in the way of honesty, no sense of conflict or vulnerability, and certainly not much in the way of confessions. One listener described it as mutual verbal backpatting and questioned how Meghan could claim she was on the same level of entrepreneurial struggle as her guests.
Critically and socially, Markle's podcast has been met with a less than stellar reception, earning only 2 stars from outlets like The Telegraph, Standard, and The Guardian. And actually today, I wish I could remember what paper it was.
Worse still, many question the very foundation of As Ever, the brand at the center of this venture. Some argue that Meghan's products aren't solving any real problems. They also claim that they are luxury lifestyle items sold at high prices in a market already flooded with similar options. In that sense, they say she has missed one of the most basic things of entrepreneurship: identify a need and offer a reasonable solution for it. If the products serve no clear purpose and the conversations on her show avoid the hard truths, what then is being offered to the audience?
India Block from The Standard argued that Meghan's podcast style seemed outdated and too focused on her own experiences rather than offering valuable insight. Meanwhile, The Express said the episode veered too far away from meaningful conversations.
Furthermore, there appears to be considerable confusion about the podcast's identity. One episode feels like a mom chat. The next one brushes the surface of business. Another touches on health. And unfortunately, this lack of cohesion leaves listeners unsure of what the show is about. To them, if you're trying to take something away from it, you can't. And with that, it is hard to keep people coming back.
Meanwhile, The Express said the episode veered too far away from meaningful conversations and focused too much on casual chats and superficial topics.
The tone doesn't help either. To a lot of listeners, it feels too carefully curated, like you're reading off paper cards to avoid saying the wrong thing. Some say Meghan, who has spent years navigating a brutal media landscape and faced trauma, including racist attacks, intense public judgment, and even suicidal thoughts, has every reason to be protective of her image. Yet that caution can sometimes backfire. What some interpret as self-preservation, others see as insincerity. And this phase creates a sense of distance between her and her listeners, rather than a connection.
Many critics agreed the podcast lacked substance and failed to deliver, valuable business strategies, but YouTube commentators were a little more blunt.
A listener summed it up by saying, "There is no confessional in Confessions. It's just Meghan and her friends talking about how much they love her." While fans and critics alike were already picking apart Meghan Markle's latest attempt at reinvention through her podcast, Confessions of a Female Founder, it didn't take long for cultural commentator Candace Owens to enter the conversation, and she didn't hold back. Known for calling out performative activism and branding disguised as empowerment, Candace made it clear that this wasn't podcasting. It was PR dressed up as purpose. The backlash worsened when she featured on Jamie's podcast.
Let the cringe begin as Meghan Markle appears on Jamie Kern Lima, one of her friends' podcasts, where their tears are flowing. Lies are as well, as Meghan Markle attempts to spin
Meghan on Jamie's podcast. Meghan Markle had never done a podcast interview before, so when she finally sat down in front of a microphone, she didn't ease into it, she went deep, and it was a surprising choice for a debut. Sitting across from her close friend Jamie Kern Lima, the founder of IT Cosmetics, Meghan opened up about everything from her time in the royal family to parenting, self-worth, and even her marriage. However, instead of applause, what followed was something else entirely.
Conversation is full of performatives like this.
To my amazing friend, Meghan, a great friendship.
For us, it's just become so lasting.
Yeah.
On Jamie's show, Meghan described how she tries to build up her children's self-esteem by using a word she leans on herself. Yet. When her kids say, "I can't do it," she responds, "You can't do it yet." Then, almost as if reminding herself just as much as them, she added, "I don't know yet." The idea was simple, but it came off a little too polished, as usual, and some viewers weren't buying it. Not long after the episode aired, the clip began to spread online. Nonetheless, it wasn't praise that made it viral. It was a comedian named Paul Olima who lit the match. He edited himself into the video, pretending to be a producer listening in quiet horror, rolling his eyes at what he called the most insufferable conversation ever. His version racked up over 1.6 million views and nearly 100,000 likes. People weren't just laughing at the clip. They thought Meghan was cringeworthy.
I love that your eyes are sparkling right now. Meghan, how are you today? Which, by the way, I just have to say, yes.
Enjoy them.
I forgot to have fun.
That wasn't even the most controversial part of the conversation. conversation. Midway through the interview, Meghan took a rather unusual turn. She started talking about the early days with Harry. At first, she said, everything felt like butterflies were fluttering around her. But unfortunately, when they were thrown into chaos, 6 months into dating, we were already in the trenches, she told Jamie, hinting at the media storm that exploded when their relationship became public. Then things got more personal. Meghan started talking about the early days with Harry. Not the fairy tale version, but the chaos that followed just 6 months in.
While adding, gushingly, he's also a fox, if you haven't noticed. My husband's very, very handsome. She said very twice. But his heart is even more beautiful.
That's when the media found out they were dating. And everything changed. She didn't name names, but it was clear who she was talking about when she said they were thrown straight into the trenches. To her, who was entirely at the heart of the whole issue, she felt like no one was protecting her. At one point, while she was pregnant with Archie, she said she asked for help with her mental health and was told not to, because it wouldn't look good. In another sneak peek clip released ahead of the episode, Meghan looked visibly emotional, laughing through watery eyes as she joked about skipping the makeup. "This is why it's nice not to have makeup on," she said with a soft chuckle. However, there was more to those tears than laughter. What brought them on was a handwritten note from her 2 children, 5-year-old old Prince Archie and 3-year-old Princess Lilibet.
So beautiful.
Oh, I don't know. I wasn't expecting that one. Yeah, they're just it's just so great. This is why it's so nice to not have makeup on. Yeah.
Reading it aloud, Meghan paused. From Archie and Lily via Papa, she began, "We love your cooking, we love your pancakes, and we love your hugs. You're the best mummy, and we love you." She smiled through the emotion and added, "So sweet. I also love that it's mummy instead of mommy," which is very British. Then she looked up, wiping her eyes. "I wasn't expecting this. They're just so great," she said. "This is why it's so nice to have no makeup on, thank you." Throughout the episode, Meghan didn't just reflect on the sweet notes from her kids, she opened up about the emotional weight of constantly having to prove herself. At this stage in her life, she concluded that she was done with it. "We spend so much of our lives trying to prove something," she said, "to prove that you're enough, that you're pretty enough, that you're smart enough, that you're a good wife or a good friend. And I was like, I'm just so done with the prove it game. And if you can't see it, if you don't get it, I don't need to prove it to you. That's your loss."
We spend so much of our life trying to prove something. To prove that you're enough. You have to prove that you're pretty enough. You have to prove that you're smart enough. You prove that you're a good wife or a good friend. And I was like, I am just so done with the prove it game.
Her words resonated. Jamie, overcome with emotion herself, put it perfectly. Letting go of that need to prove anything feels like joy, tastes like freedom. From this point onwards, it felt like a breakthrough moment, but not everyone saw it that way. Across social media and in numerous comments, many were quick to call those tears fake, insisting the emotion was staged, but it wasn't all sadness. Meghan also spoke about where she and Harry are now, and it was surprisingly sweet.
And talking about lowlights, there's been a lot of conjecture about Meghan Markle's podcast appearance with her good friend, particularly about this point of the interview where she appeared to be wiping away non-existent tears. Have a look.
She said that stepping away from royal life in 2020 gave them the space to breathe, to finally enjoy each other without everything else hanging over them. 7 years later, she said, "We're more in love than ever." She even called Harry a fox and said she believed they would be together forever. However, for every confession, there was a side eye waiting online. The podcast didn't exactly land the way she probably hoped. Indeed, her fans welcomed her vulnerability. Some even said it was her most honest moment in a long time.
In love now more than ever.
So I feel like it's more of a honeymoon period for us now. He's also a fox. If you haven't noticed, my husband's very, very handsome.
Nonetheless, to her critics, the whole thing felt manufactured. Once the backlash gained momentum, Candace Owens stepped in again, and things shifted. Now, this connection wasn't random. Owens has a long and well-documented history of criticizing Meghan Markle, particularly following her 2021 Oprah interview and the Sussexes' Netflix docuseries. And if you didn't know all about it, here you go. When Meghan Markle and Prince Harry sat down with Oprah Winfrey in March 2021, it was a watershed moment. The interview aired on CBS and was viewed by millions worldwide.
Do you believe in magic? Do you believe? What is that? Like, this is just, even when she was giving us reality, she couldn't give us reality. So I just wanted to say that if you don't like her, it's not your fault. It's because she's extremely unlikable, okay? She has the non-it factor. It's amazing. She's actually good at this.
Meghan spoke openly about her time as a senior member of the royal family, revealing that she had experienced suicidal thoughts and felt isolated. She said that when she sought mental health support from within the institution, unfortunately, she was denied help. One of the most explosive claims was that during her pregnancy with Archie, there were concerns and conversations within the family about how dark the baby's skin might be. The couple refused to name who allegedly made the remark, which led to widespread media coverage and public speculation.
That I would do it, and I just didn't want to be alive anymore.
Following the broadcast, the backlash was immediate, and not just from the British press. Candace Owens, a conservative political commentator and frequent critic of Meghan, publicly criticized the interview. In appearances on Fox News, Owens accused Meghan of exaggerating her experiences and manipulating public sympathy. She claimed the allegations of racism were unsubstantiated and aimed at Meghan's biracial identity, suggesting that she didn't look black enough for her story of racial discrimination to be believable. She also emphasized that Meghan never identified as black until she wanted to escape the royal family.
And the first time that you find that Meghan mentions her blackness is when she wants to get out of the royal family. Even at the wedding, the only black people she had were billionaires that she wanted to be on their shows. She had Oprah and she had Gayle King and she had...
In one interview, Owens said, "You would not be able to discern just by looking at Meghan Markle that she's black," dismissing the idea that race played a significant role in Meghan's treatment by the press or the institution. Owens also targeted Meghan's mental health disclosures, aligning herself with Piers Morgan, who had been widely criticized for saying he didn't believe Meghan's claims of suicidal ideation. Owens defended Morgan, saying that people should be allowed to question the motives of public figures without being labeled racist or misogynistic.
Why they're working on this project, mental health, bias, cyberbullying, just everything that the couple wants you to believe that they're focused on, when in fact they are the bullies. Meghan is barely black. They are not suffering through anything because of racism.
She described Meghan as a narcissist and a typical leftist, and accused her of trying to take down the royal family without providing clear evidence. Yet the criticisms didn't stop there. In December 2022, Meghan and Harry released a 6-part Netflix docuseries titled Harry and Meghan. Produced through their Archewell company, the series expanded on the themes introduced in the interview with Oprah. It documented their love story, the couple's difficulties with the British press, and their eventual decision to leave the UK. Meghan revisited the topic of institutional neglect, suggesting that royal aides discouraged her from seeking help for mental health struggles. The series also highlighted the couple's legal battles with tabloids and showed how stories were, in their words, planted by the institution. Though Owens did not release a lengthy critique of the Netflix series, her previous positions were echoed online by critics who questioned the authenticity of Meghan's story. On her podcast and other media appearances, Owens had previously framed Meghan as someone who uses her blackness when convenient, and accused her of undermining the monarchy for personal gain. She claimed Harry had gone from a decorated military officer to someone who now played second fiddle in what she described as Meghan's ongoing campaign for attention.
This is a woman that was escaping her blackness throughout her entire life until she realized that it could be used to her advantage. And I find that to be despicably racist.
In past appearances, including on the Candace Owens show and Tucker Carlson Tonight, Owens has accused Meghan of manipulating public sympathy, dishonoring the royal family, and contributing to what she called Prince Harry's decline in dignity. She has also criticized Meghan's claims of racism and mental health struggles, often positioning them as exaggerated or dishonest.
Want to hear you routinely trash the people that are most closest to you, and then what are they going to do? Just respect you? You think that after you go through talking about your own brother and your own niece, you put your 3-year-old niece in your book?
Due to that, anytime Meghan releases new content, especially content that leans into personal storytelling, Owens' past comments re-enter the conversation. After the podcast clip went viral, social media was flooded with references to Owens' previous remarks. Users resurfaced old clips, interviews, and tweets, using them as a framework to challenge the sincerity of Meghan's emotional moment. However, the doubts around Meghan aren't exactly new. They just got louder. More and more people seem unconvinced by what she presents. The reasons behind that skepticism aren't always simple. For many critics, it comes down to what they perceive as a pattern. What Meghan says doesn't always align with her actions. There's a sense that the messaging doesn't quite match the reality. She talks about wanting privacy, yet she is constantly in the public eye, from podcasts and documentaries to high-profile interviews. And for many, it doesn't add up.
And you already get all of the Meghan and Harry buzzwords. They talk about mental health, bias, cyberbullying, and of course, black. because they have to just squeeze that in so their contestants that they're talking to.
Then there's how she handled things during her time with the royal family. People still talk about the behind-the-scenes tension, stories about strained relationships, staff complaints, and those uncomfortable moments that played out in public. Whether those stories are entirely fair or not, they've stuck. They've shaped how a lot of people see her now. You can see the shift in how the public feels, especially in the UK. There was even some hope early on that Meghan might shake things up in the monarchy. However, that excitement didn't last. Over time, that interest turned into exhaustion, and now the numbers reflect that shift. Public opinion, especially in the UK, has cooled significantly. Polls show support has dropped, replaced by doubt, and for some, outright suspicion. The media has also been all over the place when it comes to Meghan. One day, she's being applauded. The next, she's on the front page fodder for all the wrong reasons. Some people believe she has been unfairly targeted and held to a different standard than others in the public eye. Others think she's carefully steering the narrative, using the spotlight to her advantage. Reactions to the podcast with Jamie Kern Lima were just as mixed.
I am getting emotional right now. Getting out of the prove it game, like, feels like joy, tastes like freedom.
On one end of the spectrum, you had commentators like Angela Mollard calling it nauseating and claiming it felt like it was broadcast from La La Land. That's a pretty strong take, and it wasn't isolated. As we mentioned, many critics said the interview felt overly polished, overly emotional, and at times, just hard to take seriously. Some were particularly put off by what they saw as Meghan's overuse of flowery language. There were too many adjectives and too much dramatization, which made it come across as forced rather than heartfelt. Then, of course, there was the accusation floating around online that she had borrowed or even plagiarized parts of her show's concept. Whether or not there's any real weight to those claims, they added another layer to the doubts that were already on the surface. On the other hand, others raised concerns about her long-term plans. If this podcast is meant to be the foundation of her next chapter, then how stable is that foundation? Can she hold an audience? Can she build something lasting if she doesn't shift the public perception? On the other hand, however, not everyone disliked it. Some listeners appreciated the emotion, especially the moment she read that sweet letter from Archie and Lily. It felt intimate. And for those who have followed Meghan's story from the beginning, seeing her tear up over being called mummy instead of mommy was the kind of personal detail that resonated. Others noted that featuring Jamie Kern Lima, who is not only successful but also deeply respected in the business world, in the podcast was a smart move. It brought credibility, and at the very least, it helped position the podcast as something more than just another celebrity venture. However, even with those glimpses of sincerity and strategy, the reaction remains deeply split. Meghan is walking a tightrope between vulnerability and performative behavior. The tricky part, the more she tries to open up, the more some people seem to doubt her. Whether this podcast turns things around for her or becomes just another chapter in the long, complicated public story of Meghan Markle, it remains unknown. What do you think? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, like, share, and subscribe to this channel. Before you go, explore the other videos on your screen.